Hi, everyone. Welcome along as we explore the second in our series of how governments use and abuse media in both peace and war in the first quarter century of modern media, that is, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Today's subject is Germany, so grab a pretzel, crack open a Becker Pilsner, and enjoy this presentation, which is in two parts, because Canvas cannot accommodate a lecture-length show. Germany is an old culture and an old people, but the country itself is new. For nearly 1,000 years, there were scores of assorted duchies, kingdoms, provinces, and other jurisdictions in Central Europe. It was not until the mid-1800s when the most powerful German state, Prussia, under its leader, Otto von Bismarck, began to unify most of the German-speaking lands through a combination of war and ethnic unity. Germany became a country in 1871. Although an autocrat, Bismarck was far ahead of his time in pioneering many social welfare programs, including accident insurance and old age insurance. In addition, Bismarck lightened many of the newspaper censorship laws then existing. Most wars are colossally wasteful, and World War I is the prime example. European countries blundered into it, tangled by alliances with their geopolitical allies. Germany nearly won the war, almost capturing Paris in the first year in 1914. 4 years later, both sides were exhausted, and an armistice, that is, a peace treaty, not a surrender, was signed. Germany was not defeated in battle, and its troops were not in retreat at war's end. The war toppled the emperors in Russia, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Germany. A new government was formed, named the Weimar Republic, after the city where the Constitutional Convention convened. The relief and release of the war produced a wild, hedonistic decade in Europe. In the US, we call it the Roaring Twenties. They called it the Golden Twenties. Weimar was a very tolerant, open society. If you've ever seen the movie Cabaret, that's a pretty close approximation. Unfortunately, the escapist mindset of the time did not extend to the economy. Germany was punished for its part in the war by staggering war reparations, nearly bankrupting the country. The communists tried to take over Germany after the war, the way they had capitalized on Russia's instability in 1917. The German government was unstable, the currency had little backing, and little confidence from the capital markets. As a result, ruinous inflation destroyed the economy. Here you see photos of how worthless the money became. One Deutschmark was reprinted as 1,000,000. A woman fed her furnace with paper money. A man took his salary in a wheelbarrow. It got so bad that workers demanded to be paid twice a day so they could run to the bakery at lunch and buy bread, before the price rose again at the end of the workday. Inevitably, in any crisis, there are agitators, troublemakers, malcontents, sociopaths, just talented enough to grab the spotlight and try to leverage themselves into positions of visibility or political power. Adolf Hitler was a drifter, thought himself an artist, although he wasn't one, and drifted himself right into World War I, where he rose to the rank of corporal, won a medal for bravery, and developed a taste for glory. In the rare photograph on the right, Hitler is circled in the crowd in Berlin as Germany declared war on Russia August 1st, 1914. He was 25 years old. In the political chaos of the 1920s, Hitler joined a small group, the National Socialists, shortened to Nazis. In 1923, he led a small band of revolutionaries that tried to overthrow the local government in Munich. That attempt failed. He was arrested and sentenced to a rather comfortable jail term. While there, Hitler wrote his autobiography and political statement Mein Kampf. I've tried to read it in English and German. It doesn't make any more sense in one language than the other. But it did crystallize attention on Hitler as a leader of one of the many splinter political groups rallying in the streets. Unlike in the rural Soviet Union, where illiteracy was high and radio and film were propagandistic mainstays, media in urban, industrialized Germany was geared toward the highly literate German population. Dramatic posters were a regular sight on German streets. This poster is illustrative of the chaos slowly devouring Germany in the 1920s. The Nazis have declared the Marxists, that is, the communists, the enemy. But the Nazis were socialists too. The Nazis are always pictured as being on the extreme right and communists on the extreme left. So let's hear what Hitler himself has to say about it on the next slide. History tends to bear out that the difference between the two, the Nazis and the communists, is that the communists were international violent socialists and the Nazis were nationalistic violent socialists. Fact is, most of these ideological movements were a smokescreen for attempts to grab naked power. The people most hurt were the people whom the revolutionaries pretended to help, the common people. Germany had an unstable economy and an unstable multi-party political system. The Nazis capitalized on the violence and economic disaster and gradually built up political support. As in Russia, when people are hungry and scared, they will follow anyone who promises relief. The next 3 slides demonstrate this political and psychological principle. Both Lenin and Hitler were technological revolutionaries as well. Just as Lenin immediately understood the power of radio and films, Hitler too capitalized on radio. Moreover, Hitler was the first politician to take to the skies and campaign by airplane, as this poster and the photo on the next slide demonstrate. Hitler combined the two. He would fly into a city, give a campaign speech over the radio, and then fly to another city and repeat the process the same day, sometimes 2 or 3 cities on the same day. In January 1933, Hitler and the Nazis finally took power, 10 years after his abortive revolution started in a Munich beer hall. Nearly the very first thing they did was to control the media, imposing immediate censorship or control over newspapers, radio, public performances, art, etc. The photographs on this and the next slide show an infamous book burning. Burning books leads to burning ideas and then burning people. Between monopolizing the media and targeting violence against political opponents, Germany quickly became a frightening place to live. The Nazis institutionalized their propaganda efforts into a powerful government bureaucracy. Here is an example of the typical contempt that dictators have for their own people. Hitler's chief aide was Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, who corralled all art and culture toward Nazi Party-approved content and goals. Like many despots, Hitler was a failed artist, Karl Marx was a failed journalist, Goebbels was a failed author, even though he had a PhD. Goebbels fancied himself an intellectual and had a deep appreciation of the films of Sergei Eisenstein. Goebbels was exceptionally energetic in pumping various streams of propaganda to the German people up through the very last days of the war. The Nazis had a practical problem. Compared to the US, Europe is crowded. Countries are bunched up against one another. It's very easy for radio signals to cross international borders. So how do you restrict the people's access to other countries' radios, but still get them to listen to yours? The answer was simple, if not brutal. First encourage and then confiscate all regular radios and then compelled the German people to buy radios with frequencies only programmed by the Nazis. I'll see you in 4 slides. By the way, did you notice that little orange card on the radio 2 slides back? Here's a close-up of what it says. Here is a poster of the Nazis' European radio service. Like the Soviets, the Nazis used radio to distort the horror that was going on inside their own countries. Germany had been known as a cultured, modern society for more than a century. It was hard at first to believe the stories of the people who fled. In contrast, few were able to escape Russia, which had few foreign visitors to begin with. I will send you links of examples of Hitler's public speaking style. What might seem to you as demonic, irrational ranting is really a master manipulator's trick. When watching an entire speech, you can catch on to this. He starts off slowly, softly, creating an air of anxiety in the crowd because people cannot hear him clearly. Then he builds, aiming toward an emotional, near hysterical finish. The theatrics used all kinds of techniques: peer pressure of crowds, dramatic lighting, evocative music, and colorful flags, all added to the hypnotic appeal. As you can see, politics invaded the schoolroom too. Even a purely local civic activity, like keeping your neighborhood clean, became part of the Nazi quest for total social control. This poster reads, "There he goes again." The Nazis controlled all public events, and the event of all events was the 1936 Olympics held in Berlin. Hitler wanted the Games to be a showcase for the superiority of Nazi-style government. In a subsequent posting later this week, we will look at one of the greatest Olympic movies of all time and one of the most innovative movies ever made.